So hello everyone and welcome to today's RGE Knowledge Bites for Business webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah Hillier and I'm Head of Business Development here at Robert Gordon University. So before we get started with today's discussion, I just wanted to draw your attention to our housekeeping slide. Tina, if you could possibly move on the slide, thank you, to make sure that we have an enjoyable session today. One of the key things to note is that we welcome your questions throughout the webinar, and we ask that we post these in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to get through as many of these as we can at the end of the presentation. We will be using the chat function today as well, as we'll be getting you to get involved with some of the discussion later on, but any questions you have, please try and put them in the Q&A function. So today's discussion is around managing a hybrid team, something I'm sure many of us are currently trying to do, or will certainly be doing in the near future. At the moment, in campus, as you'll see from my background, it's not my house, but most of my team are still working from home. So I'm really looking forward to today's session to pick up some tips from Susan and Tina. So providing with the tips in this area today are Susan McQuennan and Tina McGregor from RGE's Learning and Development team. Susan and Tina work with RGE staff in a variety of leadership and management roles across the university, whether that's professional, academic, technical and support. They deliver a suite of ILM accredited leadership development programmes, as well as a portfolio of skills for success workshops for staff. They're both qualified and experienced leadership coaches and have extensive experience in a variety of personality profiling instruments. I personally have participated in some of the programmes that Susan and Tina offer here at RGE, so know that this is going to be a really useful and interactive and fun session today. So I'll now hand over to Tina.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for that introduction, Sarah. As Sarah said, my name is Tina McGregor, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. So, as you heard in the introduction, today we are going to cover these four main areas in relation to managing and leading a hybrid team. So we're going to look at effective communication within a hybrid working context, and discuss how to motivate and engage employees while fostering a shared sense of purpose. And all of this will lead to effective and enhancement of collaboration. So these are the four areas, and all of that is underpinned by some top tips from the latest research in hybrid working. So we thought it would be a very good way of framing the session would be starting with a definition. And this definition comes from the CBI People Skills paper 2021. And as you can see, there's lots of different moving parts within the hybrid working model. So it involves a mixture of both remote and on-site or office-based working, and people might work at different times, and in some cases even in different time zones. Now, some of the current attitudes to hybrid working have been subject to a wide range of research over the last couple of months, or one may add over the last year. And some recent research from a Adecco group suggests that 77% of UK employers favour a hybrid working model. And this is also supported by a survey by Gardner, as you can see there, where 82% of leaders said they favoured some type of remote hybrid working model. And this research is further supported by our own RGU staff survey, which was conducted recently. I think it was last November. And a staggering 98% of RGU staff expressed a preference for hybrid working. So I think it would be quite safe to say that hybrid working will stay with us, or will be with us for some time in the perhaps not a long future, or maybe a distant future. But working in a hybrid way, where team members may be working from different locations at different times, require a high degree of planning and organizing. And exactly how hybrid working will vary from organization to organization, and even from team to team. So each organization, each team might have to look at this in their own unique way in order to maximize the potential from hybrid working. However, one thing remains the same, and that is the role of the manager. The role of the line manager is absolutely paramount in establishing these new ways of working. And especially the line manager will be responsible for the communication with the hybrid team. And this is what we are going to look at in a little bit more detail now. So, the Chartered Institute of Personal Development did some research and wrote some guidelines, very useful guidelines, one may add, around establishing new ways of working within the hybrid context. And the research showed that it might be useful for line managers, for managers to, if they can, and I understand that that might not always be possible, but it might be really helpful where possible to talk to your team individually about their personal preference for future working patterns. And although it might not, of course, be possible to meet all those expectations, having that professional dialogue will foster engagement and enable trust, and make your people feel like they are part of that discussion, part of that new normal, if that's what we would call it. And it's also important at this point to make clear to your team that personal preferences can't necessarily be met, but as a manager, you will engage and provide more information as and when that comes and becomes transparent. The second step in communicating with your hybrid team before actually even perhaps transitioning to a hybrid model would be to perhaps gather the team together. And I really like that, because I think we are now transitioning into a new way of working, especially we've all been working remote in the past year. And this will perhaps be a good opportunity for managers to kind of reset the scene and gather the team together, probably in a hybrid way, one may add, and ask some of the following questions. And these questions were developed by the Chartered the CIPD, Chartered Institute of Personal Development. And I really like this kind of question to frame that team discussion. So, what worked well for your team in the past year? Perhaps that would be a good discussion to start having some professional dialogue around what really worked well and what can we learn from that. And that would start on a positive kind of platform for which to have these really engaging discussions. Second bullet point of this slide, what would need to be in place for us to work effectively? And of course, you might modify these questions to suit your individual organization or indeed team. The third bullet point, I think, is also important, because actually, what are the risks? What are the challenges for our team about working in a hybrid way? And you're not asking here to get solutions, and it doesn't even mean that you have to actually implement everything you discuss. But again, as I said before in the previous slides, it will give you an absolute valuable opportunity as a leader to engage your team around those discussions. And then the last bullet point, really important as well. If we work in a hybrid way, how can we ensure that we are inclusive and fair? And one really important point to remember is that the move to hybrid work represents a lot of change and challenges to a lot of people. And different people will deal with this and experience this new way of working in different ways. Some of your people will be excited. They will be, yes, we are going back to the physical workplace, and be really happy about that, while others will feel anxiety. They might be a little bit worried. It might be a little bit overwhelming. And as a manager, it's absolutely of paramount importance that you consider that. And you will need to show empathy, concern, and considerations to all points of view. And that's why it's useful to engage the team around the new way and get their input around the establishment of the new ways of working. So, as we said, uncertainty ahead, this new model is likely that people will experience in different ways. And as we said, it's really important that we give considerations to other people's point of view. But since we have all of you lovely people in this webinar on this Thursday afternoon, we would like to hear your viewpoints. So what I would like you to do is use the chat pane and write a word or two, the first words which comes to mind when you see the word uncertainty. There's no right or wrong here, but what feelings does that word evoke? What comes to mind? And then Susan and I will have a look at it and we'll discuss that as a team.
So we've got Gail's written in here, fear. So fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got more fear, lots of fears and anxieties and worries and concerns, uncertain. Yeah, lots of, it's kind of negative, really, feelings there.
Yeah. So fear, uncertainty, anxiety, all of those feelings. And obviously we want to remain positive within this, but I think as manager, it's really important that we consider this. Anything else, Susan?
So yes, sorry, jumping in over the top of you, somebody's losing my job, and a need for reassurance as well. And I suppose that's what all the underpinnings of worries and anxieties and fears are kind of leading up to, aren't they?
Right. So yeah. So thank you for sharing this in such an open and transparent manner. So it goes from.
I'm just going to add. I just noticed someone put in the Q&A one as well. That's slightly different from the others, which was energized.
Right. Right. Thank you, Sarah. So there you go. We are sitting here in a webinar, and this word evokes different feelings and attitudes in different feelings, and none of them are right or wrong. I just want to stress that. So some people feel excited about uncertainty, about change, while others will feel anxiety and apprehensive. And I suppose the point here is to just make sure that as we transition into this next stage of work, on your world of work, that as managers, we give due consideration to that within the context of hybrid working. Is there one last one there, Susan, before I move on, or is it all very much the same, which is great?
Nothing new.
So thank you for that. Fantastic. And I'm glad we got something from both spectrums, which is fantastic. Now, this is my perception of uncertainty. On your left, well, on my left, I should say, you will see a picture of all scribbles, whether it depends on how you perceive this, but I look at this as a ball of string all jumbled up. And that's how uncertainty looked to me. If somebody said to me, Tina, draw uncertainty, this is how it would look. And I think that absolutely echoes those words we just saw in the chat pane. And of course, this might also be very positive. It might be a very long string at the very end of it when we unravel it all. So what has never been more important in terms of managing your hybrid teams in these times of uncertainty, but transitioning maybe is the better word or terminology to use here, is the notion of building trust. And all of those of you who are managing people at the moment will know that this is one of the underpinning kind of ethos we speak about when we teach leadership and management, not just in the hybrid world of working, but I would say even more so now, that it's even more during times of uncertainty and change that employees need to know that we care about them. And of course, that means applying all those wonderful leadership skills we all possess, such as taking time to listen to people and to address their concern. And that will ultimately lead to more effective and enhanced communication. I believe that the communication within a remote during the past year and hybrid context is absolutely the glue which holds the team together. And I think communication, although the same principles around good communication applies, the ones we all know, I think when we talk about communication within a hybrid context, I think we have to give much more consideration to planning and our intention behind that communication. And I think we are in a good position moving forward because we have had a year of applying some of these principles, having worked remotely. So again, the research around communication and remote work is that we need to be more intentional, as perhaps we would have been if we were in the physical space. Because no longer do we have the luxury of meeting somebody ad hoc in the corridor or having that water cooler conversation. That's going to require more thinking and planning to still create that engagement, which might be lost. And of course, then there's the whole other dimension of some people being in the office and others not. And we'll touch on that a little bit in a couple of slides. But I think that good communication is just not the leader's responsibility. I think as leaders, there's a lot of pressure attached to that position. But I think it's a shared responsibility across the team. And as a leader, you can foster that culture and those ethos by engaging the team in the discussion around what is the best way we can communicate. And engaging them around that, you might consider some of the following key points here. And again, these came from the CIPD, and I think they are really, really useful, and hopefully there's something there you can take away and apply in your own organization with your own teams. But basic things to consider would include how often does the team need to meet and for what purpose? And I think maybe this is a chance. Maybe this is our chance now to think out of the box, to think in a more creative and innovative way, that perhaps the way we have done it before might need to change in order to make sure that we get the most out of that communication. I'm very passionate about the middle bullet point, deciding upon key communication challenge, because if you are like me, we've all been exposed to so many different communication channels, I should say, during the past year. I have people saying they're using Slack, WhatsApp, Teams, Zoom, text, if people even use text anymore. But actually, as a leader, as a team, I think it's of paramount importance that you decide what are your main channels going to be. And that way you're going to ensure that nothing gets lost. There's nothing falling through the cracks. And if we talk about communication being the glue holding this hybrid team together, then we don't want to have any cracks. And that means you will have to set expectation and have that dialogue ongoing with your team around what are the best. And I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong here. It's up to the individual team organization to choose what works best for them. And of course, the last one is important, that you have processes for sharing, working arrangement and location. It could be very, very easy to get confused about who is where and who is when. So perhaps just even a simple spreadsheet or whatever you feel might work within your organization to have a process for sharing, working arrangements and location. And of course, building a little bit of flexibility in case there's contingencies we need to overcome. And just before I'm handing over to Susan, I just really, really want to reiterate that you can see I have put a yellow post-it note there with important, because I think one of the most important factors in communicating with a hybrid team really, really is to ensure the information reaches everyone whenever and wherever they are working. Yeah, that might not always be possible. And I understand many of you out there, you will be working in organizations where you are dealing with different time zones, etc., etc. But equal access to information and knowledge is key to preventing communication issues and feelings of exclusion and unfairness. You want to foster engagement and inclusion. And I think equal access to information is absolutely paramount to this. And lastly, my last bit here is that if you are working in a hybrid way yourself, don't forget to be clear with your team about when you're in the office or when you're working, so your team know when and how to get in touch with you. And always provide opportunities for employees to speak with you on a one-to-one, because that will serve to foster that really important engagement and inclusion. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Susan, who will now take you through motivation and engagement.
Thank you, Tina, for those really interesting points about the importance of communication when you're managing a hybrid team. I'd like to remind everybody that we're going to have an opportunity for questions at the end. There's a Q&A box, and I'd really urge you to write any questions that you have in the box, and anything that you'd like to explore in a little bit more depth, we'll have some time later to do that. And before I go on, remind you all that the chat pane's there. If anything occurs to you as we're going through the session, please just write some notes in there, and we can, Tina's going to be picking up on it when I'm doing my part of the presentation. I just wonder if anybody would like to make any comments about what's happened so far, anything that's really grabbed you, anything that you're interested in particularly. Just pop some words in the chat pane if so. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the, I'm going to turn to how we motivate and engage a hybrid team. Motivation is a really complex subject, and there are a lot of theories that underpin motivation, and a lot of them are conflicting and a lot of them are very similar. But what I want to do, because we don't have time to get into all those different theories about motivating and how we apply them to the hybrid team, I thought we could just work intuitively here. In the chat pane, could I ask you, if everybody could partake in this, it'd be fantastic, to write in here a word or two about what motivates you at work. What gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you do the job that you do? What gives you that profound sense of satisfaction, you know, that really motivates you to work?
So I'm getting lots coming up. People are engaging. Yeah. So Gail's getting motivated by colleagues at work with. Fantastic. What I can learn is from Jill. Sarah is saying being challenged and a sense of achievement. And Kit, I love that, being trusted.
Yeah, and there's one up at the top here from Nikki, helping people and making a difference.
Yeah.
Continuing to develop, delivering good results, successfully
Shona, helping people. I'm with you, Shona. David, shared passions about why we do what we do, seeing the result of our actions. Fabulous.
Working
the team succeeding.
Fantastic. Anything else in there anybody would like to add?
Making positive changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And I have, yeah, but I'm sorry, there's something at the top. I asked you to put in anything about Tina's session, and there's a little bit there from Gillian about difficult to know if you're over or under communicating. And she said, I guess what you're saying is just to ask and check and listen. And
absolutely. I would always say in doubt, over communicate better than under communicate. That would be what I would say. Oh, so having an impact, Sandra is saying in relation to your question, Susan. And again, Yvonne, making a difference to people we work with to ensure that we have the information and resources they need. This is powerful stuff. Yes, absolutely.
So absolutely fantastic stuff. Thank you everybody for contributing to that. And I think we're all noticing here actually that there's so many different answers there. So many different answers. And moving on to this slide here, underneath all those motivations theories that I was talking to you about, lies the fact that we're ultimately motivated in two ways. We're either motivated in an intrinsic way, and that comes from inside, and that's our sense of satisfaction, our mastery of purpose, that wanting to make a difference, that sense of achievement, to having an impact that you all talked about there. So what I'm seeing with the things that were in the chat room there, the chat box, is I think every single one of those comments there was intrinsic. We're all being intrinsically motivated. But there's the other side, isn't there? There's the extrinsic motivation, the external stuff. So the money and the status that comes with the job, or the power, or the rewards, or the bonuses, or the company BMWs, or whatever it is that you might get if you're working in the city. And I did notice from the chat box there that I don't think, did you, Tina? I didn't see any extrinsic motivators there.
No, it was all intrinsic. Exactly. I noticed that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, would anybody like to be brave enough to write in there something extrinsic that I mean, obviously we're all motivated at a certain point about money, but was anybody holding anything back, felt they didn't want to put in money or bonuses? Or is it, oh yeah, we've got holidays in further education are great.
That's so true, Jill.
Recognition is good, absolutely brilliant, yeah. Recognition and praise.
Wonderful.
Again, okay, holidays would be an extrinsic, I think. Thank you for that, Jill. But yeah, so extrinsic is being told I'm trusted and doing a good job. Yeah, work-life balance, flexibility, and rewarded for effort. So a little bit more extrinsic coming in there, but on the whole, we're really looking at a lot of intrinsic motivation. And you know what? As a manager, if I'm assuming you're all managers here, managers of teams, that is fantastic news for you, because you've all got it within your power to use any and all of these things to motivate your teams. It's sometimes a little bit more difficult to look at the pay and the conditions and extra holidays and BMWs and things, but actually as managers, you've all got it within your power to motivate your teams with that intrinsic motivation. So that's a fantastic first kind of wow, you know, that's good. And as I said, it clearly illustrates this range of answers here that one size fits all approach to motivation is not going to work unless you're lucky enough to have sort of clones in your team, but that's not good in other ways. And it can be really, really hard to know what actually does motivate the individuals in your team. You know, well, I've just asked a question here of some people, and we've got all sorts of different answers. And, you know, we can be assuming that people are motivated. Sorry? No? We can be merrily going along assuming that because something motivates us, it's going to motivate the rest of our team and motivate that way, and that may not work. So we're coming back to that communication again. The only way that you're really going to know what motivates the individuals in your team is to take the time to ask them, to talk to them, to speak to them, to really take an interest in what motivates them, and then listening really actively, because they may not want to say exactly what they're motivated by, but you can listen between the lines, and then you're developing a really good understanding of your whole team's key drivers, and then you can tailor your approach accordingly. Any comments about that? Do you all think as managers that that's something that you would be, is a reasonable? Okay, 100%, thank you. One of the things, yeah, makes sense, fantastic. One of the things that Tina and I do in our team is we do a lot of team development with teams in the university. And, you know, we're looking at different styles of personality styles and what motivates people. And it can be completely different depending on what personality the style they have. And some of you I know on the participant list have actually taken part in some of our pop colour sessions where we do explore with teams about what motivates. So having a little away day like that could be a fantastic way to just find out and explore a little bit more about what motivates people. So fantastic. And you're probably going to have to adjust your leadership style to get the best out of your hybrid team. And this is also means that you're going to have to learn how to empower them so that wherever they're working, whether that's in the office or at home or wherever they want to work, they're free to do their jobs without having to wait for you as the manager to give instructions or to get your permission or for you to make a decision. And, you know, in order to empower the team with that, you have to be able to equip them with the skills and the confidence and the authority, and you have to be able to trust them to make the decisions that they need to make in order to do their jobs the way that works best for them. So empowerment is huge. And we do look, when we look at motivation, empowerment is one of the big sort of drivers of motivation. And one of the best ways we find of empowering our people is to adopt a coaching style of leadership. So instead of going into that tell style and that coercive style and that, you know, you're going to do this and then you're going to do that, you coach them. And coaching is all about asking them questions, powerful questions, which enables them to come up with their own solutions. So they're not waiting for you anymore to tell them what to do. They become empowered and they become outcome focused because they know what they need to do. And by the coach, so when they come to you and ask you questions, if you spend the time to coach them, to say, well, let's talk this through. What do you think would be some good options here? It gives them the skills and the confidence that leads to that empowerment, and that leads to increased levels of accountability and motivation. And as managers, if you've got empowered, accountable, motivated team members, you're on a winner. So it's what you're really looking for. Any comments about empowerment here? Seen anything there? Hopefully that's all kind of rung true with you and made you realise, well, made reinforce. Oh, here we are. I find it hard to get the balance between ensuring they know how they're free to make decisions on their own versus feeling not supported. Yeah. Sometimes my team asks me something that I don't think they need to ask, but they obviously do. I don't want to be dismissive. Really good question. Empowerment is good. Don't want micromanagement. Fantastic. Yeah, so that coaching is quite interesting. I think, Tina, you might want to come in here as well, but personally I think a team member's going to know when you're just kind of doing the slopey shoulder thing and saying, you know, I don't really care, I can't be bothered, off you go and do it yourself, I'm not engaged, I'm not supporting you. And when you're actually coaching them towards a solution, it's not just, there's more to it, isn't there? It's actually asking.
Exactly. Yes, asking them. And I think you're right, Susan, especially within the hybrid working environment, to actually ask rather than tell would be really, really powerful and also very useful. Because if you go back to that transition and people might feel uncertainty, I mean, it's the old rule, isn't it? If you feel we are part of the decision-making process, we are more likely to engage and come along.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we've got another comment here. Open conversation on trust, that works both ways. Yes, trust absolutely has to work both ways. Your team have to trust that you've got their back, and you have to trust that when they're working at home, they're working towards their goals and objectives. So trust is huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So fantastic. So we've got some top tips here, motivating your hybrid team, just a roundup of what we've talked about. One size does not fit all. Just because, you know, that old adage about, you know, treat other people like you want to be treated, it doesn't necessarily mean that here. You want to find out what motivates them, and you want to do everything in your power to support them in that. And that you do that by asking them, you listen to them. The chat pane is obscuring this slide, so I have to have a look at the other bits that were put on here. Yeah, adopt a coaching style of management. We're very big on that. You empower them, you ask those powerful questions to unearth their own solutions. So, you know, you don't just say, off you go and do it. You say, well, what are your options? What could you do here? Let's go through each one and look at the pros and cons of it. So after we've done that, what would you suggest would be the best way to take this forward? If that doesn't work, what would your option B be? So it's a different kind of much more engaged way of speaking to somebody than just saying, off you go and do it. I've got something else in the chat room, empathizing with a new world. If they have priorities at home, be conscious of that and appreciate they may have had to homeschool. Oh my goodness, that would have been an absolute nightmare. I'm so glad I didn't have to do that in addition to their day-to-day job, absolutely. And, you know, I was speaking to somebody yesterday who's got young children, and she said it's fantastic because it means I can take the children to nursery and bring them home again and do things, and then I can work for a couple of hours in the evening, and it works very well for everybody. So absolutely. And I think it's about staying focused on the outcomes. So make sure that they deliver what they're engaged to deliver, but don't worry too much about how and when they do it. It's okay, as long as you're getting out of them what they want, what you want from them. And I definitely think there is no place in this new world for micromanaging. We need to trust our teams. We need to motivate them with their goals, and we need to make sure they're meeting their objectives. But the micromanaging, I think, has really just got to go out the window generally. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, we're going to look at the shared sense of purpose. And this is a really important factor when you're managing a hybrid team. So what you don't want, and you never did want it, but even more so now in this new hybrid world, is a team of individuals all pulling in their own directions, all pursuing their own interests, moving in ways that you as a manager and the business may not want them to be pulling in. So what you need to do is to foster this shared sense of purpose with the team, that they're all pulling in the same direction. Yes, they've got different aspects to their jobs, but they're all pulling in the same direction. And, you know, so that, as I said, even when they're not working in the physical space with you keeping track, aka micromanaging, they're all pulling together to achieve their goals and objectives. So another chat pane activity. I'm sure many of you here are experienced managers. What do you do, or what do you think you could do to ensure that the team are all pulling together, that they're all moving in the same direction to the same aims? Let's get some ideas here. Keeping it clear
and consistent. Yeah. Fabulous. Open and transparent communication, I see coming up, Susan. Yeah, great point, Gail.
Yeah, a really nice point here about understanding the end goal, corporate strategy, and how their role contributes. That is massive. I'm going to come to that actually. Common goals, understanding what's important and why, and reminders of ultimate goals.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes.
Fantastic. Work to a clear team plan everyone has had input into. Brilliant. Personal objectives linked to the companies. Sorry for typos, don't worry, I'm the biggest typo queen when I do these things. Such a hurry to get them out. Absolutely, I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that managers, or one of the biggest tools that managers often don't use, is really aligning their teams to the strategy and getting the team to see where do we fit in, both as a team and as the individuals within the team, to that strategy. What is my higher purpose in this? You know, so many people think I'm just going to come into work, put my bum on the seat at 9 a.m. and leave at 5 in the old world, and have no real idea about what their ultimate aim is, what they're trying to do for the company. So totally on message there. Thank you very much for those people that have put that into the chat. And I think, yes, they need to know what's going on. They need to know what the direction of travel is. Certainly don't keep them in the dark. We're going back to that communication. You know, there's that whole thing about, oh, knowledge is power. Not anymore. Get it out there, disseminate it. Don't keep it to yourself. You really need to keep the team informed about the business's strategic ambitions and goals. They need to know where they fit into that. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that? Do you all agree with that? And Tina, if you could just move on to the next slide, please. I feel like Chris Whitty here. One of the nicest and easiest ways to achieve this is to allow individuals to participate in their own goal setting process. And we had that actually. Yvonne was talking about working to a clear plan that everyone has input to. And research is very clear that employees who are involved in the goal setting process are more committed to their objectives. And it actually gets better than that. They also will set higher level objectives and goals than those that were simply assigned their objectives. So getting employees to contribute to the objective setting process is really big, but they can't do that unless they know what the overall direction of travel is and what the strategic plan is and where they fit into it. So you really need to ensure that your team know that. You know, at RGU, I'm sure in many of your companies, we ask our staff at their annual performance review to set their own objectives. Yes, they're not always going to be completely agreed. They're going to be discussed and then maybe amended with the manager, and one might be knocked off and another one might be put on. But ultimately, the more the employees know about what the team needs to do and their role in that, the more they're going to be able to come up with some really lovely objectives. And their objectives may well actually be better than the ones that you as the manager might have set for them without participating in them. So and that's another way to really give them a greater sense of empowerment. And we discussed that as a real key factor in motivation. So not seeing anything else in the chat room here. I think celebrating success is massive. I think it's really, really important that all of the members of the team are aware of each other's successes. It can be very easy if we're not working in the office for somebody to really, you know, put in a big bid or do a massive piece of work or get something accepted for a massive publication somewhere, and it doesn't get disseminated because, you know, oh, I told my manager and nobody else knows. And I think it needs to be communicated, remember, across all the channels. So, you know, that old standard that we used to do, bringing the cakes, is probably not going to be appropriate anymore, because if the whole team are not in the office, the ones that come in and get the stale ones in 2 days' time, it's not very motivational for them. So think about things that you can celebrate the whole team together across the channels. I mean, first of all, you'd be recognising at team meetings. And you might even be looking at night out or something, but it depends on the composition of your team. Not everybody, you have to be very sensitive to the fact that not everybody wants to go to a pub. Might not be the kind of thing they want to do anyway, but certainly with this new pandemic world, you know, people might not want to be doing that. So you have to be very sensitive to what people want to do. So next slide, Tina. So top tips to foster a shared sense of purpose are, as we said, promote a sense of belonging. Keep the team appraised of what's going on, the bigger picture, what strategic goals are they all pulling together towards. And this is where the much maligned team away day is often really helpful, because you can take them away and you can discuss things at higher level and talk about strategies and goals and where they fit into it. Get them to help set their own objectives and assess morale and celebrate. Celebrate success really brings the team together. And then that brings us to collaboration. And as Tina said at the beginning, this is where we were moving towards. We want a collaborative team. Communicate across all the channels. Build trust. Don't micromanage. Coach. Set team goals. Foster a shared sense of purpose and celebrate success. And finally, look after yourself. As a team's manager, it's really sometimes assumed that you're invincible. You know all the answers. You're always going to get it right. You're there to absorb the shocks. And to a certain element, that is right, but nobody's absolutely perfect. And that will put you under a lot of pressure. So what you need to do is remember to look after yourself, take care of yourself, get support, have a network, take time out, look after yourself. Don't feel you have to do it all. And that's it from me. Any comments at this point in the chat box? I see there's some questions, so Sarah's going to move us on to questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Susan and Tina. That was really, really interesting, and I've taken loads of notes. Lots of things I'm going to start using now that we're working in a sort of hybrid environment here within the business development team anyway. So thank you so much. Do have a couple of questions coming in, and just to remind everyone to still post their questions. If we don't get through them all, I know that Susan and Tina would be happy to follow up with you afterwards, or likewise, if you do have something that you want to follow up that you don't want to share with everybody, they'll share their email addresses at the very end so that you can do that. So I'll just pick up on the question that's come through from Gillian. So any ideas for how to best promote a sense of belonging? Anything that you can share from your experience or any examples?
Susan, do you want me? And then, yeah. Right. So I think an example I would use from my own world, being part of a very cohesive and wonderful team, is, if you're asking this question from a leadership perspective, is to be authentic and to be open and to share what you know with your team. And it's okay if you don't know something, and then just say so in an authentic manner. I think that will totally go some way to build that trust and that shared sense of purpose. So be open, honest, and authentic. Susan, I don't know whether you have anything to add to that, but that's me.
I totally agree with everything you've said, Tina. Absolutely. I mean, our team, we're a very small team, but we just make sure that at the beginning of every team meeting over the last year, we've been sitting at home. We always start off with a good 10-minute chat about what's been happening and what happened with the dog and how's the cat and have you had your jab? So we bring the sort of personal into it. We're friendly. So we feel that we also feel we've got each other's backs as well. So there's just that authenticity and that openness and that communication and that trust and sharing. You're right. We're very lucky. We work for a fantastic organisation that's really we love working there, and I think that helps to be a team at part of that. Yes. I don't know if that's helped.
Yes, there's a message from Nikki here, and I think that Sarah, I don't know whether you want to read that, but I think it's really, really important just to highlight that, because Nikki is saying, yeah, it's great, all of this, but if the organization is not open to that and the culture is not fostering that, it can be difficult. But I would say, well, start with yourself, and perhaps in some small way you will be able to influence your sphere of responsibility. But that is a difficult one, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I hope you don't mind me, Sarah. There's another question or a statement from Nikki in the chat room. Do you mind if I?
No, go for it. Go for it. Fine.
She's saying it thinks it comes more naturally to some than others, and I would agree. Some people are much more emotionally intelligent than others and able to kind of use that towards their leadership style. And again, the research has shown that the more emotionally intelligent you are, the better results you will get, actually, in terms of turnover as well as with teams as well. But I agree with you. I think it can be difficult in certain areas, and I do think that, especially at RGU, I think we all know that there's going to be a new policy about hybrid working. We suspect it's going to be a sort of 50-50 model. And my concern is that it's going to be left to the managers to implement without a lot of training. So some managers are going to be really good at this, and they're going to be able to manage it really well, and everybody's going to be happy. And other managers are probably going to be a little bit more suspicious, and they'll be, much more, no, I need you under my nose, I need you here, you've got to be, so that could then engender a whole gulf between the haves and the have-nots, which can lead to, morale problems. So it is, it's a very difficult path to navigate. And I think, organizations have really got to get their act together, pull in the same direction, and train their managers as to what they actually really want from them, and then, walk the talk as well.
I completely agree, Susan. I think it's a really, really difficult area, and I think it was okay when everyone was working from home, because you were all in the same situation. So you were all having to have your Teams calls, you were all online. But when you have maybe half of your team are in the office and half are at home, and I found this because I had some time when I was back on campus last year, when the restrictions eased a bit over the summer. And I would maybe tell some people in my team something that were in the office, but forget that I haven't told the ones that were working at home. And it's just, you talked about communication, how important that was earlier. Is there any tips around that, about just making sure that you're sharing the same information? Because it's so easy when you're passing someone in the corridor, or you go through to their desk and you tell them the information, and then you get involved with something else and forget you've got the rest of your team that are the other side of a screen.
Such a good point, Sarah. And I think here is where it's really important to be intentional, and actually, as a manager, probably having to think more about that than perhaps we had to, or you had to do before. And obviously, there's some information you might not need to give to the whole team, but I think it's important that you categorize what actually everybody needs to know, and perhaps also do a little bit of internal risk analysis. If that information goes to a certain group and not to another, what damage might that have? And it's that awareness. And as managers, people are not going to get it right all the time, but I think with a little bit of more consideration and intention around our communication, I think that will go a long way. And so I think it's awareness, Sarah, would be my response. Awareness.
I think somebody here said we use a Teams chat board too, so it might be worth thinking. I've just said that to Fred, I better just go and pop that into the Teams chat just to so that everybody's got it. There might also be practical tips around, as a manager, putting out a little bulletin every week, just an information bulletin, little bullet points about, sit there and every time you think I need to tell them this, or I've told so and so this, pop it on your bullet list, and then every Friday say this is information that went out this week. I've probably told some of you, I probably haven't told any of you, but just to make sure I've captured you all, here's this week's bulletin. A little bit of extra work, but it can help. And I think especially when we first go back to this, because people are going to be expecting it to not work, or they might be looking at you as the manager to think, or is she going to get this right? So I think you do need to kind of really think about some practical tips for doing those sorts of things, and and then see how it goes.
Perfect, thank you, that's really helpful. A question from Kit, and I also had this question myself because I find a challenge. Any practical specific tips on how you manage a whole company meeting, and Kit's got 25 employees, if some are in or some are out of the office, can Zoom really do it? This is going to be an ongoing issue of some of their employees will be in and out on a given day.
Do you want to start, Tina?
But do you want me to send to? Yeah, I suppose what comes to mind here is that if you remember back to the olden days, where perhaps those of you who work with different time zones, you would have that big telly on the wall, and then you would get people from abroad joining in at the meeting. So I think we perhaps have to think about, have we got facilities or resources or a room where the people who are in the office can all gather and then connect with the people remotely via a big screen, so we have to feel that they are in the room. And I suppose what I'm explaining here is probably conference calling, which I can't believe, but perhaps via Zoom, or, and again, that depends on what kind of facilities your company have in place. But I think that could work very effectively, and I've seen it working in organizations before all of this happened, with different countries, and it's working very well. Again, it comes back to that stuff we spoke about at the beginning about establishing those new norms. So find a place or find a time where that can actually happen, where you can make that happen for the majority of those 25 people.
And I think also the use of the chat, I keep calling it chat room, chat pane, whatever it's called. I think, you know, there's probably going to be a tendency for the people in the room to be the ones that, you know, talk more often and say more. It's always a little bit more awkward when you're online, isn't it? So it may be that you just have to make much more conscious use of the chat pane, make sure that you do address everything that comes up, expect certainly your remote people to be using the chat pane, and then address them and bring those things in as if they were actually in the room. And you know, remember the sort of the chat before you even start, the rapport building, getting to know you, what happened at the weekend, what did you see, Coronation Street type chat, just to, and make sure you include those people that are not in the room.
You just made me think of, sorry Sarah.
No.
Sorry, I was just going to say, hopefully by using video as well, that makes a difference, because I remember back when you would phone in to join a meeting, and I know that, you know, if you're the only other person on the phone call, and obviously no one can see you, sometimes can get forgotten in a meeting. And
yes, absolutely. And what your discussion just reminded me of the 3 Ps of effective meetings within a remote context, and I think it's applicable here. So the first piece, the purpose. So think about, what is the purpose for that meeting with the 25 people or however many there are, and the participants, who should actually be there. So yeah, we shouldn't perhaps just have meetings for meeting's sake, but if it's one where it includes everybody, then that's fine. And then I think the most important thing is to consider the platform. So I think if you have people in a physical space, then you get a room where you have access to that platform, and whether that is what Susan spoke about, Sarah, or whether it's just the old-fashioned telly on the wall or whatever. So yeah.
And I think that's really interesting what you said there about the use of video, because I think, you know, I think maybe you need to set some norms and expectations about the use of that. Personally, if it was me, I'd be expecting everyone to have their video on, because it's I know what it's like when you sit in a webinar and you haven't got your video on, you're actually answering emails under the desk, you know, or stroking the cat or whatever. I think it's really important personally. And I have already, as a kind of coach, been called in to one department at work where, you know, they've had a couple of members of staff who were not engaging in team meetings with a video off, and other people felt it was very rude. You know, obviously in an environment like this, that's fine, but when it's a team meeting, I wonder if you need to set down some policies and some rules beforehand about use of chat room, use of video, use of muting, you know, and that kind of thing. And check in with them every so often. How's this going? How does this work for you? Any improvements? You know, I'm the boss, but you know, I don't know. Or what would you suggest? What would work for you? Those sorts of things.
Fantastic. Another question here from Gillian, asking, can you share any good ways to check morale other than employee surveys?
Well, the usual measures of morale, aren't they, are things like turnover and sickness absence and not achieving goals. But I do take your point. You want something a bit more informal. I go back to asking, have that kind of relationship with the people in your team. Just kind of, how's it going? Just try and get that honest, open, trusting communication, and speak to them and ask them so that they get used to you taking care of their well-being and being interested in it. Anything, Tina, you want to add to that?
No, I absolutely agree that I think it comes back to that communication I keep harping on about. So it's that one-to-one. If obviously we've had a big team, it might not always be possible. I understand that, but it's that consistent perhaps dialogue with your people, and you will soon get attuned into how people are feeling in terms of motivation and morale. And hopefully we'll be able to have conversations about that. But yeah, it's that communication, that glue which hold it all together.
So I'm just going to, one last question because I'm conscious of time. So the question from Nikki, saying we've got lots of people excited about hybrid working in their organisation, but the organisation is one that likes bums on seats. Are there ways to influence them and show that it's possible to have a high performing and effective team using this type of working?
Yeah, that's a big question, and that's always difficult, because you're talking about changing perhaps the organizational culture here. If the culture is bums on seats, I think the way I would probably influence it is perhaps look at the external environment and messaging from governments and all other agencies, and that could to some extent perhaps drive that.
And the research shows.
Sorry. Yes, research, but yeah, we're talking about a culture change here, which a lot of companies probably will go through naturally now, but there will be people resistant now, I suppose.
So, I mean, I have a personal anecdote here. My daughter-in-law works for a research company in Glasgow, and I think it's an American company. And last time I saw her, she said, "Oh, it's awful. We're all going to. They want us bums on the seats. They want us to go back in full time." And then I saw about a month later, and she said, they've changed their policy. We're allowed to do 50-50 now. Oh, that's good. What made them change their minds? Everybody was leaving to go to work for competitors who allowed hybrid working. So it might just be a natural process. They might realise they're losing their people if they don't actually change it. So
that's quite interesting.
Surveys as well, maybe you could survey the staff and just do like we did. It was astounding. Our executive could not ignore that result. 98% of people, and I actually think the other 2% probably didn't read the question properly. It was overwhelming. So it is about changing the culture, but maybe presenting them with some evidence.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Susan and Tina. That has been such an interesting session, and I hope that everyone that's joined us today has also found it interesting. I think the fact that we've had so much engagement today and so much chat going on, I think has been really great. I know I'm just going to add, there was a question asking whether we could share the slides. I should have asked you both this before. Is that possible?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You have a copy, I think, so absolutely share the slide. That is not a problem at all.
Fantastic. We'll get that out. And also just to let everyone know that the recording of today's webinar will be available on our Knowledge Bites for Business page of the RGE website next week. So you can rewatch it if there's anything that you want to pick up or share with any of your colleagues. So our next webinar is taking place on Thursday, the 3rd of June, and we'll be joined by our colleagues from Interface, who'll be talking about the funding that they can offer if you're looking to work with the university on developing your innovative ideas. So it might be something you want to share with some of your colleagues or network. And you can find out more information about that on our web pages as well. So just thank you all very much again for joining us today. Thank you, Susan and Tina, again, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.